Money has many meanings. It is also a promise, a tool, a carrier. Like blood in the human body, it carries information, goods, values, and promises. Promises of effort and achievement. Money is a mediator, and as such it can be designed. In the next few days, we'll hopefully learn a lot about how money can be designed in different regions. I hope you'll be inspired and have fun.
When new monies, new currencies come about, they are not only economic experiments and alternatives, but more importantly, societal experiments. I'm very excited to see what we will learn in the next few days about these experiments throughout the world. And when we are talking primarily about current problems and practical aspects of regional currencies today, we should also remember that regional currencies are based on the strengthening of human rights, democracy, justice, peace and culture.
Whereas in the past, local currencies were much more created by local public authorities and banks in their normal activity. Second point, today's experiments are disconnected with the sovereignty motive and often are far from a seniorage or direct financing motive. Moreover, they rely more than ever upon a transforming and revitalizing motive. Past experiences mainly occurred during great economic disorder, leading to put first a protecting motive. Overall, the transforming rationale was very rare and limited in the past. European history shows many local currencies issued during situations of macroeconomic necessity. This is a major difference with today's local currencies spreading in developed countries where necessity is less a macroeconomic one and more a matter of human development and social cohesion and protection.
I agree with Jerome, money is a fundamentally social institution, but its forms and its uses are affected by the state. In particular, the self-interest of citizens directs them to use a means of exchange that satisfies their obligations to the political authorities. In the 1930s, this was particularly true of tax anticipation script. Local currencies, I believe, must establish some relationship with the prevailing credit system. Hand-to-hand currency, quaint as it is the tangible basis for a much larger matrix of financial liquidity, regulated for better or for worse by modern central banks. For local alternatives to standard money to establish durable roots, I believe they must articulate with the credit system in self-sustaining ways. In the 1930s, this occurred in a very limited fashion with bank script, tax anticipation, as well as stamp script. However, all of these currencies were designed at the time for short-term use. For local currencies to endure, they must create enduring niches that give rise to financial assets and liabilities that are denominated and redeemable in local currencies. I think in Europe, the tradition of hero payments systems has encouraged experiments of a far greater sophistication that have occurred in the United States. This doesn't mean that we need to develop hedge funds that speculate in local currency futures. It does mean, however, that we do need to get away from primeval acts like the licking and sticking of stamps on dirty little pieces of paper.
conversations.
It seems to me that the lesson of local currency systems, or the lesson that local currency systems has taught me at any rate in looking at them, and the possibilities to which this lesson gives rise, that economies are highly diverse, despite appearances to the contrary, and hence, as I said here, the inherent fragility of capitalism, the way in which it constantly seeks to shore itself up at all points, not throughout the education system, in the media, and in all sorts of other ways, on a day-to-day, almost minute-to-minute basis. That political lesson may well be more important than the economic lesson in trying, as it were, to create particular local economies, whatever the scale of local is that we're talking about, of regional development. It may be that the politics of economic geographies and an understanding of that politics is more crucial than simply thinking about the economic possibilities that may come from a particular kind of local currency.
Implementierungen sind in erster Linie eines, sie sind Networker auf der lokalen Ebene.
Complementary currencies are foremost local networkers and carriers of information. Their focus has to be on fostering the qualitative and quantitative density of information within the peripheral region. Regional money then becomes an antipole to what Anthony Giddens calls the de-anchorage mechanism of late modern society. On a local level, one can regard monies like barter as an inclusive mechanism. Regional monies can then be a way to surmount structural money-based tendencies for peripheral isolation. To me, this is an appeal to the organisers of barter clubs. Complementary currencies can do much more than what is claimed in money theory.
Dass Komplementärwährungen viel mehr können, als es die Geldtheorie behauptet.
And the search for more yield focuses attention on asset prices. And currently, the search for investment yield is one of the key drivers of the contemporary international financial system. I'd probably argue it was one of them, the other is probably the US current account deficit. Yet this search for yield from new or renovated asset classes has received almost no sustain from attention from academics other than economists. Yet, whereas the assets produced through securitisation were once backed by projected future incomes and revenues from large corporations and governments, now financial companies, having run out, in a sense, of those assets, are looking around for other stuff. So, for example, one of the classic asset classes they're now interested in is so-called infrastructure. Highways, streets, roads, bridges, mass transit, airports and airways, water supply and water resources, wastewater management, solid waste treatment and disposal, electrical power generation and transmission, telecommunications, hazardous waste management, and the combined systems that these elements comprise. That has become a key asset class, And it's recently that basically private sector has really turned to that as something they want to get involved in. Why? Because it's a stable income stream, one with low default. The reason for this, as I said, is precisely predictable and secure income streams which can be produced over long time periods and which you can borrow off. Wonderful, that's what you're looking for. Finding it difficult. And yet complicating this new gold rush is the fact that even after the waves of privatisation of the 80s and 90s, large amounts of infrastructure still have a close relationship with the state, whether in the form of contracts or regulation.
Reflections on the consequences of the first modernity, like the destruction of environmental resources and the growing social inequalities, forms the idealistic basis of the local currency initiatives. There are doubts in the capability of established institutions of industrial modernity, such as the global finance and monetary system, of being able to cope with these social and ecological problems. From the perspective of the initiatives, local currencies are an appropriate instrument to modify societal structures. Thus, these initiatives can be seen as forms of manifestation of reflexive modernity. First, they try to confront the negative consequences of the first modernity. Second, they support individuals in the process of coping with the demands of reflexive modernity, like individualization, loss of familiar or traditional structures, flexibility, etc. And summarizing, by supporting regional economics and non-profit organizations, by linking different regional actors, and by promoting a broad discussion about regional topics, the local currency initiatives have the potential to contribute toward regional development.
My suggestion is if you were able to have a community currency, possibly even stamp scrip, then you would have less leakage from the community whilst at the same time generating business within the community. Using stamps does ensure that the scrip ultimately can be redeemed for currency, whereas just using some other instrument means that maybe it won't be, and therefore it's less attractive for people to use. So maybe it's time to re-examine the possibility of stamp scrip, and I'd be very interested in the views of practitioners on whether this is just a historic relic or whether it has some validity
today. Entscheidender ist zum Beispiel zu erkennen, dass das allergrößte Entwicklungsprogramm dieser Welt die Globalisierung ist.
It is essential to realize that by far the greatest development aid on this planet is globalization. We are now complaining that our jobs are migrating to Southeast Asia or South America and stigmatizing globalization as evil because it threatens our jobs. The other side of the coin is that added value is now arriving in those countries where you have comparative advantages. Of course, we then have excess resources. It is now our turn to make use of these excess capacities, these excess labour resources in production. The technological progress is helping us there. That's why education, re-education, training and technological innovation are essential. So for everything that is lost by Western countries because others will do it better or cheaper, we have to compensate this by new products.
Und natürlich auch mal eine Technologiefreundlichkeit. Das heißt, alles, was uns wegwandert, weil andere das besser oder günstiger können, müssen wir kompensieren durch neue Produkte.
Geld ist ein Vermögensderivat, Geld ist allgemeines Finanzierungsmittel und Geld ist allgemeines Schuldendeckungsmittel.
Money is a derivative of assets. Money is a general credit instrument and it is a means of repaying debts. Financing and repaying debts are the most important characteristics of money. Money receives these characteristics mainly in the credit process. Modern repurchase transactions are by their character credit transactions. Since the receivers usually receive money in combination with a bond, they have to re-earn the money on the market. Thus money and money creation is far from being neutral in the economic process, but a force that actively pushes the economy. Modern market economy is largely a competition about money as a means of repaying debts. That's why, from an economic perspective, it is desirable that legal obstacles which hinder the implementation of complementary currencies are abolished. We need a legislative context which allows the emission of any kind of complementary currency, and which also sets criteria of quality so that the currencies are stable, reliable and legitimate.
Aber gleichzeitig Maßstäbe einfordert, quasi Qualitätskriterien garantiert, die dafür sorgen, dass dieses Geld auch stabil ist und seriös betrieben wird.
Dieses Geld hier, dieser Schein, der steht in meiner Bilanz auf der Aktivseite.
On my balance, this banknote is an asset. On the balance of the European Central Bank, this banknote is a liability, as the money issued by the bank. The sum of that equals zero. That means wealth, good housing, roads, schools, healthy children do not come into this world by printing notes onto bits of paper, but by blood, sweat and tears, and not by some tricks played with regional currencies. Work, capital and resources are the sole origins of people's wealth. It is an illusion to get wealthier by printing money.
Der Illusion anhängen, reicher zu werden, indem wir Geld in die Welt setzen.
When we talked about, in the early 80s, about ecology, people said to me, about ecological building and town planning, people said to me, are we going back to the Stone Ages? And solar energy, that's something for Italy, but not for Germany. Now, today, we have the most incredible program of solar energy use. You know, Hermann Scher has introduced a policy which is now being imitated by 40 countries in the world. It is being used by the World Future Council as the model for the rest of the world and so on. And I see this whole movement in a very similar, moving in a very similar way. We are going step by step. We are proving that people on the local level really want this kind of money.
In this estate, people couldn't even afford to pay their gas and electricity bills or get on the bus to go and do some work. We all know every study in mutual aid shows us that people that engage in mutual aid have some sort of resource to work with. But green money did work very, very well as an alternative, as a group of people that wanted a different form of economy from capitalism. And I don't think that's a problem. I think the whole point about 1989 and the changes in Eastern Europe is that it gave people the time and the space to experiment with alternatives and with something different. And the people in green money were enjoying the freedom that they won for themselves in 1989. And I would salute them for that. I think that really matters.
Community currency was introduced in 1996. In the first time in Korea. In 1998, one organization started the system that named Future Money. After that time, about 20 more systems were operated. So it was reported 31 community currency in 2000. In this time, Korea was put on behalf of the International Monetary Funds. After overcoming IMF, slowly the interest about community currency was gradually decreased. Now there is about 10 more systems in Korea. Hanbalets is the most active among them. Now let me introduce about the activities of the Hanbalet. The name of currency of Hanbalet is Duru. Duru is Korean, meaning that helps each other. Duru starts in 2000. It is recommended that the rate of the community money becomes 30%. And now there is about 600 members and about 60 member shops in Hanbalet. It could be estimated that it was very meaningful and valuable movement that started from downwards in Korea. Recently, it is increased the concern about community currency in Korea because the unemployment ratio and the concern about public and social welfare increase. Hanbalet had it until now, and it will continue the role of leader of Korea community currency.
So we can see that time banks are a growing initiative in the UK. They're effective in small ways, and they're really building active citizenship. So how do they fit into UK policy? Well, Tony Blair and the new Labour government is all in favour of active citizenship. They think that communities from below can meet all kinds of social and economic needs. They can fill the gaps that the public sector won't provide for. And Tony even says, let us give generously in the two currencies of time and money. I don't suppose he was thinking of time banks at the time. But he was talking about the energy that exists in communities, and we need to harness it. Time banks were able to meet people's economic needs on a small scale. People were able to earn time income, they were able to train, gain new skills, they were able to provide services for other people and be active participants in their economies. And they were able to meet their needs, they were able to get help when they needed it. Time banks also enabled people to be more active citizens socially. It was very much about building communities, about bridging communities. I would say bridging social capital is at least as important as bonding social capital in time banks.
And that money is very important to the Papuan people. It's so important that the government of Eastern Britain asked me to consult with them on how to make this a second official currency in the province. And the research that I did suggested that there was about $1.5 million US dollars for a population of 100,000 people on that little island. Now, if they could monetize that, that really starts to have a large effect on the economy without affecting the traditional structures that were already in place. As it is, it's a convertible currency, no different than the Regio. You purchase lengths of this for a certain amount of national currency. And it's a divisible currency. You can break the rattan strips and join them back together again. So it's like being able to join together a number of coins to make a euro, like two 50-cent pieces or something like that. So you can join these together. And these lengths can be used to buy anything. You can buy a refrigerator, land, building materials, food, whatever you want. So it's very valuable to the people and they're very happy to work with it.
Ja, mit dieser zunehmenden Wirtschaftskrise und der zunehmenden Illiquidität der Bevölkerung.
With the rise of the economic crisis in Argentina, there was a growing shortage of money. Poverty was prevalent among the general population. Barter exchange started to grow rapidly. Between 1995 and 2002, both the number of barter exchange clubs and their membership grew exponentially. The indirect involvement with barter was even greater, Estimates reveal that 1/4 of the Argentinian population was using barter exchange to make a living, making this the largest barter experiment worldwide.
Über 2 Millionen geschätzt, wobei man sagen muss, dass die indirekte Verbreitung des Tracking, die indirekten Auswirkungen ja viel weiter gehen. Also Hochrechnungen zufolge wurden die
The organizers of barter were clearly motivated to acquire more club members, because every club member has to pay a registration fee between 2 and 4 pesos. So more club members meant more pesos. As a result, there were fake and multiple registrations, and credito notes were printed and issued without limitation, so the obvious happened.